Welcome to Unleash Your Inner Goldilocks, How to Get It Just Right. I am so excited to join you in another insightful and deeply meaningful conversation. And today we are going to talk about leadership. A lot of times people refer to leadership, but they are talking about people in positional power. I want us to take a step back and truly think about what is leadership and how do you become a leader. And one of the best kept secrets in the profession is you're never leading other people, you're leading yourself. You're always leading yourself, and in the process, you're influencing others. And when you keep that in perspective, you don't step off the boundary and start bossing people around. It's only when we realize that we have to lead ourselves. I am a leader for myself, and as a leader, I am going to inspire others to become leaders. And when I inspire others and we have a group of leaders, then the right leader will rise up for the situation, because not everybody is suited for every situation. How do I become that person? How do I nurture? And what is truly some of the tools and some of the secrets to developing leadership? That is going to be our conversation. And I want you to take a pen and paper and keep notes. Some of the things you're going to keep in your mind as you're taking notes are, what about the way I show up that is not serving me? And therefore, I need to release it. I need to let go. What about how I'm showing up has room for improvement? Therefore, what am I going to embrace and embody as part of who I am in my journey? So when you start keeping these two lists, you start decluttering and you start acquiring the right tools, and then you start showing up the way you want to be, because you get to be uniquely you, and your leadership style gets to be uniquely you. You do not need to be like anybody else. Okay? That is an important lesson to remember. Each of us are created uniquely for a purpose. You know, sometimes people use snowflakes as a derogatory. Embrace it. We're each a snowflake. Okay? And that is for a purpose, because look at your hand. If ever you're confused about, do I need to be like everybody else? Look at your hand. Are all 5 fingers the same? No. I once broke my little finger, and you know, who needs a little finger? We don't think about it. But I realized when my little finger was taped off, there were a lot of things I couldn't do. A lot of things I couldn't do. So just because somebody doesn't see your value doesn't mean you don't have value. Just because somebody doesn't see the way you show up as a leader doesn't make you less of a leader. So don't hand over the power of that value placement to somebody else. Hold it with you. Hold it with you. Look at what you can release. Look at what you can embody. And that allows you to continually grow. It allows you to continually transform. And in that journey, you're going to meet a lot of people. You're going to transform a lot of people. And I can promise you, you're going to transform yourself. Today, to have this amazing conversation with me is Amy Chambers. Amy, welcome to Unleash Your Inner Goldilocks.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
My pleasure. Amy is a veteran banker from the financial services sector. She has not just studied and understood leadership, she lives leadership. She lives leadership, and she helps other people grow into leaders, and people who are already leaders, she helps them become a better version of who they are. So, Amy, as we get the conversation started, I want us to first touch on, how did your leadership journey come about? And what about you did you learn through that journey to leadership?
I love this. So very important to me. And I was working in banks when I was just out of college and through college, and had no passion for leadership at that time. Thought I was going to go to law school, saw myself going on and doing other things. And a lot of moments or things sort of happened in the work environment that I was in. And I felt either unappreciated or unvalued, or there were decisions being made and my opinion wasn't considered. And I saw those things happening to other people as well. And I began to realize, oh, the connection to all of this is leadership. People loving their job, feeling engaged, feeling empowered. That all comes down to leadership. And I got very interested about leadership. You know, what makes for good leadership? What makes for not so good leadership? And it became very personal for me. Again, I won't share exactly these stories that happened, but they're probably very familiar and relatable to a lot of people. But I started realizing, you know what, leadership failed me in that moment. There was a better answer to that problem, or a better way of being. I really want to kind of study this and observe this and see if I can do it. And as I began to go down that journey, a few things I learned about myself. One, I learned that I have the ability to connect well with people, and that I really care about other people. And I realized I belonged in leadership because of that. It was very interesting to me. Are people growing? Are they developing? Are they getting new skills? Are they being coached? Are they being invested in? And I started to realize, oh, I have a real knack for that. I have a real knack for finding out what that looks like. And I also realized that I was not afraid to use my voice. I wasn't afraid to push back. I wasn't afraid to express a difference of opinion. I started to realize other people struggle with these things at times, and they're afraid to speak up. They don't have the courage to say, hey, I see that differently. And I started to realize great leaders, not only do they do that well, but they invite other people to do that as well. They're not afraid of dissension. They know they're going to get to better solutions that way. And I started to realize, hey, I have like a real gift for that. This is probably where I belong, not in a courtroom, but in leadership. And as I advanced, I developed a fascination with leadership all over the world and in different kinds of organizations, not just financial services, which is what has led me to where I am today.
Beautiful. So a couple of things jumped out at me as you were talking. You talked about you were not afraid to use your voice. And you also mentioned the word courage. Right? In the West, I was not born and raised in the West, so I was raised differently. But in the West, women are not encouraged to use their voice. Women are encouraged to play with dolls, grow up to be a good wife, right? And so career and competing and having your voice almost seems masculine. And then when women end up in leadership positions, they don't know how to maintain their femininity. So they emulate the men in leadership and they become a male version. So they're just, you know, pantsuit wearing females who act like men. So when you hear me say that, I'm sure you have seen that around you. How did you stay true to who you are? And what gave you the impetus to truly have the ability to keep your voice loud and heard?
That's a great question. And really what it comes down to was me deciding that something else was more important. Like a lot of people when they're younger, I viewed my success early on as what my boss said it was, or what the company said it was. Where do I stack up on some report? Am I, you know, in the red? Am I in the yellow? Am I in the green? And that had a lot of impact on my identity. Do I feel I'm doing a good job? And at some point, I read enough books, I found a few mentors that helped me realize I get to decide what success looks like. I get to decide what my values and my beliefs are. And just as you said earlier, Dr. Cass, about the finger on the hand, and it's every part of it is very important. I began to realize, you know, at the end of the day, in this life, in this world, it's just going to be me at the end. And I should be valued and respected for who I truly am, not the mold or the model I'm trying to squeeze myself into. And so I began to leave companies where I didn't feel that my voice was valued and appreciated. I went through several different organizations looking for the leadership that valued the person that speaks up, dissents, wears the pink and purple suits instead of just the black and gray suits, wants, you know, people to ask questions and bring up the tough stuff. And eventually I did find that. I found mentors that weren't intimidated by that, were excited about that, were very much encouraging me, hey, you be you. And I think those kinds of leaders are out there, I began to look for that. But I also just said, I am not going to sacrifice who I am. And I'm not going to work the long hours and take on these very difficult projects that impact my work-life balance, because my beliefs, my values, they come from me. They're just too important to give up for that. And so I think anybody can really do that, but we've just got to make a decision about who we are, what our values and beliefs are that are important, and then really choose to have the courage to follow those and say, it might mean that I leave an organization. It might mean that I have to seek out a new boss. It might mean that I go into business for myself. But if I have these values and beliefs that are important to me, I'm not going to turn my back on them for any reason. And it's very helpful, I think, to write them down, have them in front of you, know what they are. And for me, courage and the ability to disagree was at the top of my list. Transparency, authenticity. I realized that staying in environments where I had to sort of silence myself was a violation of who I was. And I just said, I refuse to do that.
That is a beautiful way to approach it. And I'm smiling here because one of the first things I realized coming to the United States is everybody wore grays and blacks and blue suits. I am from South Asia. We are as jewel-toned and as bright and colorful as you come. Look at the color of my hair. I wear a nose ring. It's like, you know, all the traditional United States values are out the door. If they're going to hire me, they're going to hire me exactly like this, right? Because I am proudly, culturally who I am. And it's so funny when one person does it, everybody else feels like they got permission. So today, when I give keynotes, when I am doing training in companies, the younger women come up to me and they thank me saying, because of you, I can have a pierced nose in the office. We know it's cultural for you because you stood in your culture and authentically showed up the way you are. It opened up the doors for us to make that choice, right? We don't realize these little things matter, but when you dress in colorful manner, it truly is a reflection of your sunny personality. You're not mimicking the drab around you just because outside is black and white and gray in the winter. We don't have to be that way, right? So I see where you're coming from because you are a bundle of sunshine. The way you communicate, the way you show up, it is who you are. And so when you dress accordingly, you are showing up authentically because how you are showing up and who you are being are not two different things. So talk to us about it. If you were coaching young women or women already in leadership who feel like they have to be able to fit into the box somebody else put there, especially in a world that was not created by women, what are 2 or 3 tips you'd have for them to truly be who they are without worrying or without taking the pressure on themselves to become something they're not? Because at that point, they lose their authenticity.
That's right. I love this conversation because one of the things I'd put on that list is what we're doing right now, which is talking about it and normalizing it and socializing it. We're saying, hey, this is okay. It's not like you're doing something wrong to be yourself and march to the beat of your own drum. I think that's the biggest thing, is to say that. And then really secondarily to show that. I can't tell you how many conversations I've been in where I'm asking for information. And usually this is when people are working with me for the first time. They're struggling to give me bad news or tell me something that they don't think I'm going to want to hear. And I really have to demonstrate, hey, it's okay. I want to know how you really feel about this. I don't sense I'm getting the whole story here. Please remember that at the end of the day, I want us to have honesty and transparency, and whatever you tell me, we're going to work through it and it's going to be all right. And so one of the things I see leaders do that really shuts this down is when they get bad news or someone's acting in a way that they don't align with, they blow up, they get angry, they get hostile, they sort of punish or retaliate against their people. It's a huge mistake, because if you do that when you get bad news or someone acts in a way that's surprising to you or dissimilar to how you would act, you never will see them act that way again. You kind of shut it down permanently. And so instead it's to say, hey, I want you to dissent. I want you to disagree. I want you to be yourself. I'm going to ask questions, show a real curiosity in that. And then when it happens, to cheer it on and support it and to say, thank you. I really appreciate you. You went on a limb today. You took a road less traveled. I'm so proud of you for having done that. And over time, people tend to open up about past traumas and wounds, and they'll start to talk about stories or examples where that isn't the case. What you're trying to show them is, hey, that's not the case any longer. That's not how it's going to be with me. And really, you shouldn't feel that you have to be that way again in the future. So again, the talking about it, the validating it, the cheering it on, the recognizing it when it does happen, that goes a really, really long way. I think the final thing is just leading by example. When you said it perfectly, Dr. Cass, when we choose to do it, we unconsciously give other people that permission to follow and do it as well. And then it becomes more of a movement. So I just love that we're doing this today. I think this is exactly spot on.
I am loving every bit of it, Amy. And the beautiful thing about it is we are two women from two different parts of the world, two different cultures, two different language backgrounds, two different value systems, but doesn't take away the fact that we are strong women who believe in empowering other women, and we stand in our truth. Yeah. We stand in our authenticity, and we are comfortable allowing the other to be themselves. And so to me, this conversation is also modeling how two women leaders can have a conversation, how we can show up and truly lift each other up.
Love it. As you've been talking about some of the decisions you've had to make, even the nose ring and the hair, Dr. Cass, I think those are some of the reasons that you have been successful. They're not things that have stood in the way of your success. They've actually allowed you to have greater success. And so it's really exciting to interact with you and to validate for myself, yep, it always works when we follow our hearts, when we live our truth, when we know what our values and beliefs are, and we're not afraid of those. Other people take notice. And when you're around the right people, it never bites you in the butt. It tends to serve you. And so it's really great to see these both living out in action. And I think what you're ultimately pointing out, as you say, we're from different parts of the world and we've had completely different backgrounds. These concepts are universal. At the end of the day, people want to feel accepted for who they are. They don't want to be judged. They want to feel free to sort of exude their best talents. We all have very different talents and skills and strengths. And when we feel like we have to play into a role or a part and kind of get pigeonholed, I think that's where we end up in trouble. And so I believe that there's many other women out in the world wanting to do this and wanting to be this way, but they just feel that they shouldn't. And again, I think that's a major mistake. If people just live as they really are inside, great things happen. So yeah, really great to see.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you bring up a good point. Women are looking for the blueprint to follow.
Yeah.
None of us come with a manual. We were not manufactured in a Chinese factory, right? So I always say, even those put together furniture, they write backwards, right? So the order sequencing of the put together furniture is backwards. So even if you got instructions, don't follow it, right? So we are uniquely created for a purpose. Keep figuring your purpose and keep moving forward, because you don't have to have all the answers. And that's the other thing, right? Women are afraid to make mistakes. I heard a woman talk about, we raise boys to be courageous and we raise girls to be perfect in the West. Okay. So if we are raising them to be perfect, they're always afraid to do something that they believe is not perfect. Yep. And perfection doesn't exist. So you are setting the bar to such a level where the benchmark doesn't even exist. So we as older women have to mentor younger women and say, there is no perfection. Who you are is perfect enough, it's good enough, and then start from there and build. And so where do you find that people are willing to take that message, and where do you think folks struggle even hearing it?
Yeah, this is a great topic. This shows up in my book a lot. And so I'm just, to backtrack, the topic of mistakes and vulnerability and perfection is a huge theme in leadership. And I do feel that it's leaders' responsibility, whether it's in the classroom, in our educational institutions, whether it's in politics, whether it's in corporate America. It does come down to leaders to say, it's okay to try and fail. Mistakes and failures are a part of success. We should be doing that. If we're not failing and we're not experiencing mistakes and setbacks, then we're probably not innovating or trying enough new things. I expect that. And one of the things I think leaders can do to help that along is to talk about what I call war stories in my book, where leaders are willing to share all the moments that they failed and that they've had mistakes. And a lot of leaders don't do this. They act as though, it was always easy for them, or they've always been in the role that they're in. We all know that's not true. Sports heroes and celebrities all talk about the times before they were famous that they put in all these hours and they were training and they were working and they were practicing and they weren't always seeing results. And then over time, eventually they became the finished product that they are today. We as a society tend to look at finished people and say, oh, you must have just been born that way, or you got lucky, or you were given circumstances I didn't have. And the reality is that's not true. I really believe NFL stars, NBA stars, any kind of celebrity, any person in a position in power can do great service by talking about their early days when they didn't have it all figured out and they weren't sure of how it was all going to end. And they had weak moments where they lost motivation. There's a lot of examples of people that do this. And these can be very empowering and uplifting stories because they help people feel, okay, it's not just me. And I do think leaders really should have a commitment of saying, I'm going to talk about that to, again, make it okay and to normalize what other people are going through so that all people, but especially women, know that it's okay to try and fail, and that at the end of the day, it's not a failure unless they view it as a failure. The biggest failure is us saying, oh, my lack of perfection is a failure. Then that is where it actually becomes a failure. And so I wish that more heroes, celebrities, people in the public eye would do that and show some vulnerability. And ultimately, some of them don't want to. I think they view it as weakness, but it takes real courage in my mind to talk about those moments. And so I see, again, there's some examples of people that do it very well. I wish there were more, but that's what we can do as leaders.
Very much so. And vulnerability can be thought about as I'm showing you my weak spots, and now you're going to use that to harm me.
Yeah.
So that comes from inability to be vulnerable comes from a place of insecurity. And real courage has no insecurity. Therefore, courage is needed to be vulnerable. And a person without vulnerability, therefore, doesn't have courage, therefore cannot be a leader, right? So logically, it's an improbability. In order to become a leader, then we have to find the courage to be vulnerable. It's the rite of passage. Imagine a child learning to ride a bicycle. If you keep holding the bicycle and doesn't let the child fall and get back on the bicycle, the child will never ride it. So as a parent, as an older sibling, as an aunt, as a grandparent, whatever way you look at that child, you're going to let that child fall. But you're going to go and tell them, oh, that was not a bad hurt. That was a good hurt. Let me give you a kiss. Oh, that was just a boo-boo. Let's get back on. And then you're cheering them, right? Why don't we do that in the workplace? Because if we don't allow people to fall down and get back on, they will never learn. And if they've never learned, they're going to make mistakes. But because they were told no mistakes, they're going to hide it. And then it's going to implode. So this becomes a very vicious cycle in leadership if we don't give permission to make mistakes. And to me, mistakes are not failures. There are only 2 points of failures: being too afraid to try or quitting partway. If you don't do either of those, there was never a failure. There was a continuous improvement. So it's a mindset. Flip the mindset from perfectionist to continuous improvement.
One of the places where I've seen examples of this done well is on the ski slopes recently. I started skiing a couple of years ago. This is my 3rd season. My whole life afraid to try because I didn't want to fall. And I was afraid that if I fell, I would injure myself. I've now learned that falling is a very normal part of skiing, happens all the time. Everyone's falling all over the mountain kind of constantly. But also I realized that if I didn't try, if I didn't go, I would miss out on potentially this great joy. I'd always been kind of intrigued by it, but I just thought, well, I don't want to look stupid or incompetent. But what I've learned is, again, I get to decide that. It's a mindset. And if I fall and decide, hey, this is just a part of it, there's no stupidity at all. It's me being afraid of it that prevents me from growing this part of me. And so I've gone and I see all these children on the ski slopes at a shockingly young age, 4, 5, 6 years old. Several of them are with ski instructors, and they're falling and making all sorts of mistakes. And I noticed that the ski instructors often say to them things like, hey, that was great that you tried so hard. Oh, you attempted something really difficult there. Let's go back and do it again. That was so cool that you did that. And so the focus is not on the falling or the little error at the end. It's on the effort and the courage that kid had to try something new and practice. And as I start to see people a little bit older, 8, 10, 12, that are just blowing right past me and doing amazing, I realize, oh, that's how they were trained or taught as a kid. So they've had no fear. They've taken chances. They've not been afraid of what they were going to look like or how it was going to end. Because of that, they had continuous learning. And now that's why they are today. It's been a really cool thing to see, because it's validated for me that when people in positions of authority, leadership, power do this, again, they give people that courage to make the mistakes. They give, these people courage to try and really to kind of grade themselves on effort as opposed to the results, which allows them to enjoy that whole journey. And so that's been a place where I've been really excited to see this positive mindset being developed at a very young age. And again, these ski instructors, they're teaching these kids skiing, but they're probably helping them cultivate a mindset of growth that these kids are going to have with them their whole life. So it's been really fun to watch.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point, because skiing is just a conduit. Mm-hmm. That entire mindset and that social, emotional development and that psychological development, that is transferable. That is amazing that these coaches are taking that approach. Because if you look at adult coaches, I came to the United States to go to grad school. I went to Indiana State, but right across at IU was Bobby Knight. You make a mistake and you got chairs thrown at you, right? So I don't know why some coaches don't get it. And I'm glad that coaches who are working with children are being that motivational. They are being that uplifting, because then they're excited about, oh, you think that was cool? Let me try another one, right? And so that's the mindset you want. So as we continue to build on this, Amy, I know you just released a book. You are a #1 international best-selling author. Congratulations.
Thank
Super
you.
excited for you. And I had the honor of getting a pre-published copy so that I can be a reviewer. And I thoroughly enjoyed your book.
Thank you.
Can you take a moment and share the title of the book and tell us why you decided to write the book?
Would love to. So it's the 7 virtues of exceptional leaders. And this is all about becoming a legendary leader that transforms teams. And as I kind of shared in the beginning, I have seen a lot of very poor leadership throughout my career. I spent over 20 years in financial services, worked for 6 different organizations, saw some great leadership, but I saw a lot of instances where top talent left the organization and went off to do something else, or potentially stayed but never got to grow or develop at the hands of poor leadership. And as I began to look around, I just thought to myself, God, this is an atrocity. There are so many talented, capable people. And if they only knew some of the things that we're talking about today, hey, it's okay to push back. It's okay to fail and make mistakes. It's okay to try and not succeed instantaneously. It's okay to use your voice and to be your unique self. If leadership only led that way, the results would look different. People's engagement would look different. Revenue for the overall organization would be completely different, but the customer and employee satisfaction would look different. And this goes across any kind of industry lines or sector lines. This could be, for any organization at all. And I began to just get very passionate about, I think I've got this framework that really makes a difference. I've been testing it out. It has worked for me 100% of the time. I want to share this framework and these virtues with the world in hopes that it makes a difference. And if I can just impact a few organizations or a few leaders that say that has changed my life and how I lead, I'll feel like I did a good thing. But I really wanted to have that voice of helping people realize you can do better, and you owe your people. If you got put in a position of leadership, the day that you made the decision to accept that, you took on a responsibility to help other people rise up and unleash their greatest talents. Take that seriously. But I think some leaders aren't trained well, and so they don't know what the tools are. I really wanted to provide them with those tools. So that was my why.
That is an excellent why. Because you can always get one additional tool. You can get one additional tip, because after all, this life is a journey of continuous improvement. So thank you for taking your practical experience and the wisdom gained and bringing it into everybody's hands. Because you have made it available, maybe there are going to be younger men and women who are going to read it and grow up to be different kind of leaders. Mm-hmm. They are being given permission to be the kind of leaders they uniquely only can be themselves, right? So when you start thinking about how your leadership virtues are going to be used, do you want to take a moment and share what those 7 are? And then to share with us, if somebody was looking to start their leadership journey and they're looking at all 7 and saying, oh my God, this is overwhelming. Where do I start? Where would you recommend that they start and why?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I'll just run down them quickly. The virtues is an acronym. The V is for vision. The I is for involve. The R is for routines. The T is for talk, which is all about communication. The U is for understanding. And this one has to do a lot with learning and how people actually retain new information. The E is for encourage. That's the recognition virtue. And the S is for showcase. And to be honest with you, the virtues are in order. They go in a stepwise progression. The V for vision, it really needs to be there first, because without that, you don't really know what you're involving people about or to do. And then once you say, okay, I have this commitment to engage and enlist and involve other people in this journey, then figuring out what routines do we have, things that happen on a cadence, that comes next. So it's tough to say, here's where I would start, because ultimately I would start at the beginning and follow all of them through. I will share with you my favorite one. Again, they're all, they go together as a set, but the I for involve has special significance to me. And you made a comment at the earlier part of this, where you talked about how leaders really shouldn't just bark orders and give direction and instructions and expect people to follow them. It really is a process where you're leading yourself, but you're there to also help other people lead themselves. And I'm a big believer that if you're in leadership, you should have this faith in other people to do great things. I've seen so many leaders ultimately view their people as incapable, or like, I need to do that because if I were to give it to them, it would get done wrong or improperly. And people are much more capable than we give them credit for. They've got potential just busting at the seams. So that virtue is all about saying, don't do anything really by yourself. If you've got a problem you're trying to solve, get your team involved, give them the ownership over things. If they ask you, hey, what do you think about this? Put it kind of back in their court. What do you think about this? Let's talk about that together. They're not there to take direction from you. You are really there to help them believe in themselves so that they can become the very best that they are. And so without that one, the whole thing just crumbles. And it's probably one of the biggest things I see leaders do wrong, or improperly, for lack of a better word, is that they don't enlist and involve the very people that they were tasked to lead. And so the I is probably, out of the 7, the one that is most near and dear to my heart. And it's probably those organizations that I left. It's at the heart of why I left, is I didn't feel empowered to make my own decisions and truly experiment and test and learn and try. I felt like I was there to just carry out someone else's direction. And that is not what I got an MBA for, and not what I went to school for. And it's just, it felt like it was beneath my capabilities. And so I think that's why a lot of people leave, is that the I is missing.
And I love that. What that is also reminding us, you look at every person that the world considers a great leader. They never left their succession. They never identified and groomed a succession. It doesn't matter who. I can be a politician, it could be a business person, it could be a humanitarian.
Yeah.
None of them groomed their successor. That means nobody really involved somebody else and said, you know what, now you step in. Like Yoda says, now the student has to become the master. When does that happen? It was funny you say that. Yesterday, I was teaching till 10 o'clock and I go, and my husband said he watched the State of the Union and everybody was talking about, 2 old people, 2 grandpas are going to be running. And I'm like, what if one of these men said, you know what, it's time for the next generation to take over, But if there are concerns about their ability to do this, you know what? Let's pick the best one to run, and I will be their vice president and I will guide them like Robert De Niro was the intern in that movie, right? So what if the senior person says, I will be that safety net, I would be that coach for you, but you go for it. We don't see that anywhere.
That's, in my mind, really what great leaders should do and ought to do. And I do believe that people confuse leadership with power or authority. You've talked about this earlier. It's really not that you are exuding great leadership because you're in a position to be a leader. Leadership is something else. It's something that I've seen people that don't have official leader titles next to their name do very, very well. Anytime we're influencing other people to try harder or to push and break barriers and to consider possibilities for themselves that they didn't previously think possible, we are acting like a leader. And so I have a lot of different concepts and ways leaders can do this that are talked about in my book. One of them is ultimately, if you have meetings with your team or interactions with them, don't run those. So many people say, oh, I got to go run this meeting. You're really there to facilitate a dialogue and discussion with other people. And so ultimately saying, hey, I'm the leader, but if we're going to meet or we're going to accomplish something, I'm really not in the primary lead seat. I'm here on the sidelines. I'm here to course correct, to provide maybe some mentorship and guidance, but really they are the leaders. They are going to do this. They're just there to do that with my help. And you're right. We don't see this in a lot of institutions or organizations because people get confused of, oh, I'm the leader. I'm supposed to have all the answers. I'm supposed to be at the center of everything. I'm supposed to be the one that everyone looks to. But in my mind, great leadership is not about that at all. Great leadership is not about your own results. It's about the results that you're able to help other people have. And so anyone that's not putting their people in the driver's seat and kind of taking that back seat there to, again, kind of course correct, in my mind, they're really not leading. They may be managing, or they may be in a position of authority and power and fulfilling that role, but they are definitely not leading others. And so I'm really happy you called that out and make that distinction.
Yeah. And so what comes up for me is, in my own experience as a CFO running multi-billion-dollar organizations, I am naturally inclined to say, you're in charge, you run this, pick the team you want, and I am here. I am your fail-safe.
That's right.
Right? Yeah. I am your blind spot watcher. I am your fail-safe. I am your coach. Go for it. And you don't have to do it the way I would do it. I want you to do it differently. And I will support you, because when the rest of the organization sees you do that, now they realize you are stepping up, right? Some people don't know how to handle it. They're like, if you give me that kind of power, then I can't look at you as my leader. And that is not how it's done. Or when something goes wrong, it's your fault for giving me that authority. Well, I'm not blaming you. There was a mistake. We'll fix it, right? So some people are not conditioned and they're not ready. So there is some work to be done to get the organization and the team ready. And then it's also, we have to hire the right people who have the mindset that we all are capable of being leaders. So as we start talking about that, if you were to give people 3 tips that they should do today, they should write down today, so that they can start stepping into leadership and owning their influence power, what would those 3 things be?
I think number 1 would be to get other people excited about something, whatever that is. Maybe it's the dream or the vision and mission of whatever company you're at. Maybe it's just that you create a vision and mission for your small team, division, department, work group, but you kind of say, this is what we want to be known for. This is what we're trying to accomplish. This is where we're headed. This is the tomorrow we want to create and build and have that's going to look a little different than today. are you guys with me or not? If you can get people excited about that magnificent obsession, that dream, that goal, as much as you are, or as much as the organization is, that's a great first step in leadership, is just, can you get people to rally around that flag? I think number two, and this goes to what you were just talking about with, are people really ready? How do we know? Extend a couple of small tasks. Nothing that's going to burn, the building down if it goes poorly, but, sort of just some small challenges, some tasks, some goals to test people. And ultimately, you do a couple of things by doing this. You start to build this culture where people understand, hey, I'm going to be entrusted with some key decisions, or I'm going to be given the latitude to make a difference and a change. This may not be a big thing, but I'm being asked to do it my way and contribute and whatnot. You also get to show people as they go through that process, again, with these small things, that you are going to be there. If they've got questions, they can come back to you. You're going to maybe checking on them, on it with them in a one-on-one. Hey, how's that going? Where are we at with that? Okay, sounds good. Just remember, I'm here if you need me. But ultimately, if you do that, you get to find out who can handle more and then who isn't. It's part of an evaluation process to say, where are people at? And people are going to be at all different levels. The third thing I think is ultimately give people an environment, a safe, secure place where they can fail, make mistakes, and be themselves. Constantly tell them that's okay, and then show them that's okay. If they come back to you with a kind of an oopsie moment, don't lose it. Ask them what they learned from that. Ask them what they would do differently next time. Ask them what they're going to do differently next time, because actually you're not going to, take back trust because of that. You're going to find a way to re-extend it. Again, you might change some parameters around it, but you ultimately, just because they've screwed up once doesn't mean that all bets are off and now the trust won't be expended. So those are kind of the biggest things. Get someone excited about something, ultimately spend time involving them, give them a challenge, see how they do, and create a secure, safe space for them to be themselves. Recognize them for those moments where they march to the beat of their own drum and they do it differently. Those are probably the first three things that I think make a material difference with people being able to lean into that leadership and be with you, but also be growing themselves.
Brilliant. I love that.
Thank you.
What is the best way for folks who are watching this and listening to you to get a hold of you if they want to talk to you, want to get some insight about your book, want to talk to you about coaching, for whatever reason? Where can they get a hold of you, and what is the best way?
Yep, sounds great. I'm at amymchambers.com. I'm also on YouTube as Coach Amy Chambers, so they can learn a little more. And then I'm at amymchambers.com as an email. So those are three ways that people can learn more about me and also reach out to talk more about these concepts if they so choose. And I would love that. Welcome that.
Beautiful. So as we bring this to a close, if you were to share some wisdom that you have gained through your journey, and you look at the horizon and you say, here are some of the things I'm going to continue to work for myself. What is the wisdom you will share with others? And what is the wisdom you will take for yourself?
I think the biggest thing that I would share with others that I've learned is that our success in life and also our happiness in life comes from us focusing on the things we can control and not the things we can't control. So often I see people complain and whine or lament things that are completely out of their control, either things that have happened in the past or things that are really in the circle of control of other people. Oh, I can't believe my boss did this. I can't believe that, so-and-so said that to me. Oh, I can't believe that this friend of mine was late to dinner the other night. Sometimes it's simple stuff. And they spend an enormous amount of time wanting to whine or vent or feel frustrated about that. At the end of the day, the best and most successful people I know, and also the happiest, are always asking this question, which is, what can I do about that? How can I make the situation better with my boss or my friend that was late to dinner? Or if it's something that happened in the past, what can I learn from that to do differently now in the present and in the future? But figuring out, can I control that? Can I not control that? What part of it can I control? And living in that space that allows us to be much more empowered. It actually allows us to manage our mood better when we feel angry or frustrated. When we get into that circle of control, we can oftentimes mitigate those emotions and get back to a place of gratitude or action. Like, hey, I think I'm gonna try this, and now I feel good because at least I'm taking a step. And so that awareness that I always get to choose my response, even if I can't choose what's happening to me, I can always, again, choose how I respond and how I feel about it. That has changed my life, both my personal life and my professional life in leadership. And so that's the biggest thing, bar none, that I would say ties into mindset, which is a word you used earlier. It's a mindset of control and power. And yeah, I have a say in this. So that's the biggest thing.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Now I have a off-the-wall question.
Sure.
We've been talking, I've been watching your background. I think you're a runner.
Yes.
Numbers and medals. Talk to us about it. Share a little bit.
This is a hot topic for me, Dr. Cass, so I'll try to be succinct here. Back in 2014, I couldn't even run a mile without having to stop to walk. And I got actually very interested in theories that said you can basically learn to do anything. You can completely change things about yourself. And I thought, I'm just not a runner. I don't buy into that. I've never been a runner. I hate running. So I began to experiment with that. And so I went out and began trying to teach myself to run. And it kind of sounds silly because it's like just put one foot in front of the other, but I couldn't make it really more than 3 blocks without huffing and puffing and gasping for air. And what I figured out was over the course of that first year, through consistent practice and effort, I got better. And at the end of 2014, I ran my first 5K, just 3.1 miles, not a great distance, but for me it was monumental. And then it kind of had opened my eyes to, well, what could I do next? And within 1 year's time, because I really enjoyed this journey, and it really did, kind of like we talked about with skiing, it was helping me recognize, hey, sometimes things are hard, but we can do hard things, and we can get better through practice and effort. And if you weren't something before, you can make yourself that thing just by merely trying. And I ran, by the end of the following year, 1 year later, 20 half marathons, and I was hooked. I fell in love with running since then. So over the last 7 or 8 years, I've now ran over 200 half marathons, 11 full marathons. I've run 12,000 miles, and running has become probably one of the biggest passions in my life. It feels good to run, and I like running now, but I think what I like more is what it has taught me about myself. Struggle and obstacles are okay. In fact, our life is supposed to have some struggles and obstacles. We can do hard things. Even if you don't feel like doing something, if you go out and do the right things anyway, at the end of the day, you will ultimately achieve goals and results you didn't think possible for yourself. It helped me kind of move through those moments of where I didn't feel motivated, and I said, I'm going to go and run anyway. By the end, I thought, oh my God, I actually feel better now that I've done that. It helped me recognize progress isn't always something we can see. I didn't always see progress day to day with my improvement as a runner, but over time, all of these little small correct choices added up. And so running was kind of the vessel where I learned all that. And that's why it's become such a part of my lifestyle right now. But yeah, all of those
I'm glad I asked the question. It's sitting there looking at me. So I figured everybody who is watching this interview, this conversation, is going to have the same question. And I knew there was a way to tie it to who you are and your journey, because every part of who we are shapes us. So I'm glad I asked the question, and I'm glad you were comfortable enough to share. So thank you so much for making the time to have this conversation. I have tremendously enjoyed talking to you. And the Goldilocks community appreciates you investing in this community, having this conversation, and we invite you to come join us anytime as part of the audience and share your thoughts, ask your questions, and be a part of building together. Because ultimately, we here believe that every human interaction is an opportunity for transformation. So go out there, be inspired, influence others, transform the world around you, and in the process, just pause and take the time to transform yourself.